It's been quite a whirlwind of a month. This video is going to be from February 21st through March 20th, which is when my baby turned 4 months old. We had an occupational therapist home visit. She came out to kind of just grasp where my baby boy is at now, so that way after surgery she kind of knows how much he has regressed and what we need to work on. The very next day, on the 28th of February, last day of the month, my baby had to have his pre-op stuff done because he was under 4 months at the time. They were able to get like his labs and x-rays and all of that done. He had a checkup with his cardiologist. They did an EKG on him. He had blood drawn, which he did not like. He usually takes it like a champ, but this time he did not. He cried real tears. It broke my heart. He had chest x-rays done, and they did a very, very extensive heart echo. He's had so many heart echoes before, but this one took over an hour long, and I was watching every single thing the technician was doing, and I think I counted 87 different pictures that he took and captured and saved for the surgeon and the cardiologist to overview before starting surgery. So it was very extensive, and of course I had a bunch of paperwork I had to sign and read and fill out. One of the little nurses that day brought in this bag that had a little pamphlet in it and a necklace with a bunch of beads on it, and I will insert pictures, of course, throughout this video of what I'm talking about. And it's from the Beads of Courage organization, and on the pamphlet it had a whole bunch of things my baby was going to endure, going to go through during his surgery, and each color bead or each shape of bead represented something he was going through. And so it's kind of really neat. I wore these beads a lot up at the hospital after they gave me these beads, just for support for him, and it's something neat that we can keep and put in his little treasure box for when he gets older to show him. And I'm supposed to get more beads as he goes through things to add to it, so it's pretty neat. March 4th, he had to arrive at 7 a.m. To do the remaining pre-op stuff we couldn't have done before, and more paperwork and vitals to be checked, like his SATs and his blood pressure and his pulse ox and all of that stuff. We also got to speak with the anesthesiologist and sign more paperwork, get him in his little hospital gown, and he was in such a good mood for a little boy who hadn't eaten in hours, because they make you stop feeding him at a certain time to prepare for surgery. I got him to fall asleep before I handed him off to the team that were going to be caring for him during the surgery, and we passed him off and went to the waiting room. That he was off to sleep and surgery had started and everything was going well. We got another update around noon, which was from a nurse that came out and spoke with us, said that the surgeon was currently closing up the hole in the bottom 2 chambers of my baby's heart. They put a little patch on it, and he was currently closing that up, and he was going to take a look at the valves to see what needed to be done. Around 2 p.m. they wheeled my baby out. He was out of surgery, being wheeled into the CHSU. They didn't end up doing anything with his valves. They said that they would need to be fixed at a later date, but it was just too risky to do it right now. So they left them alone. They were both working. One is a little bit deformed and the other one's a little bit obstructed. The The valves on one of them kind of looked like 3 little doggy doors, and 2 of them on one of the valves was not working. Only one of the flaps were. So he is going to need to be repaired, but we just didn't do it during this surgery. After he was wheeled into the CHSU, we were told in 1 to 2 hours if everything was going good and they got him all settled and hooked up to machines, that we would be able to go in and see him. He, of course, was hooked up to oxygen, and he was still out of it when we got to see him. I'll insert all those pictures here. But surgery went well. He did great under anesthesia, and we were very tired that night, probably just emotional stress on us. And he was asleep anyway and comfortable. After we got to see him, we decided to go back to our hotel room and rest, and get back up to the hospital bright and early in the morning to spend the day with him. The morning of the 5th, I woke up at like 1:30 in the morning, and about 1:50 a.m. in my notes I put down, I called to check on him, of course, and he was doing really well. They took him off the ventilator at around 11 o'clock the night of his surgery, so he was breathing well on his own. They were still giving him a sedative though, because he was a bit squirmy and they wanted him to stay comfortable. He got up there at 8 a.m. and he was awake. He still looked very groggy, bless his heart, but he was hungry because it had been over 24 hours since he had eaten anything, and so they told us that he could eat, and he did get to eat a little bit. Shortly after that, I actually left my husband at the hospital with him, and I ran back to our hometown 80 miles away to pick up my my 20-month-old son. He was being watched by family, and the plans kind of fell through. So I just went back to get him. It was just going to make me and my husband have to flip-flop spending time with Sully in the CHSU, because no kids under 12 that aren't admitted in the CHSU are allowed in. So we were just flip-flopping, where I would stay with my older son and my husband would be in with the baby, and then we would switch off every few hours or so. While I was gone running the errand to go get my other son, baby boy had his catheter removed, and he was drinking breast milk great. He was very swollen, but that was to be expected with all the surgery. He had pace lines and tubes in his chest and his stomach, and they were still connected. His tubing wasn't draining very much, so they were expecting to remove them in about 24 hours because they were still oozing at the site they were inserted in his skin. His big brother was having a blast playing out in the waiting room. Of course, it was, you know, a change of scenery for him, so he was just playing away, being a toddler. The following day, on the 6th of March, we got up there in the morning again, and baby boy had kicked out both his leg IVs because he is a little kicker. Excuse me. And they had to insert a new IV into his arm. He was definitely more awake and more alert today, and they reduced the amount of fluids they had to give him, and they were just giving him pain meds as needed. They have a bunch of these little machines that were lit up green, and each one was administering fluids or some kind of medicine to my baby at different times. Next day, on March 7th, he had his chest tubes and his pace lines taken out. They were giving him morphine because he was in quite a bit of pain, and they were giving him Tylenol for discomfort as well when they could. He had a renal ultrasound to check on his kidneys and his bladder this day. He stopped eating as well. The first, few days he did really well with his feeds, and they said that this is normal for them to regress a little bit. They get so hungry because they didn't eat that they do well, but then they regress a little bit because of they're sore, they're healing, and they're very tired still. So we knew that was expected. So they were letting him drink as much as he wanted with the bottle and then feeding the rest through his NG tube in his nose. They started IV fluids so he wouldn't get dehydrated as well. Around 3 p.m. that day, they had put the feeding tube back in because it had been taken out because he was eating so well. And around 9 p.m. they took his central line out, and I want to apologize. I should have said this at the beginning of my video, but I'm red and a little congested. I'm getting over an awful cold, and we will get to that anyway in this story time. But on the 8th, both me and my husband got to hold him for the first time since surgery. I had to drive back to our hometown for more breast milk because we were out. Big brother Sam wanted to jump in and say hi. You gonna say hi? Hi. Hi. Can you say I miss Bubba?
Mama, mama, mama.
That's Mama, yeah, and that's Sam. You miss your Bubba?
Baba.
Bubba.
Baba.
Bubba.
Dog.
A dog? I don't see a dog. He also smiled for me and did his little cooing, his little talks to me this day. I also got to change a diaper for the first time. And on the 9th, they brought a swing into his room and he got to try out the swing, and boy, did he love the swing. And so I was thinking, neither of my boys have ever had a swing. I was like, I'm gonna have to go out and I'm gonna have to buy a swing for this little guy after all he's gone through. That night was very emotional for me. He was starting to be a little bit in pain. He was due for pain meds and they were getting ready to give him some, and he was in pain, and of course, me being his mom, I don't like to see him hurt and see him cry because he's hurting. And so I was quite emotional leaving him the night of the 9th. I got him calm, and then I passed him off to his nurse, and then he started crying, and it just broke my little heart having to walk away and just leave him there in the hospital. I couldn't stay with him. On the 10th, his swelling was going down. We did find out from a heart echo that they did after his surgery that the patch that they put on the hole in his heart did have a small leak, but they weren't too concerned about it. The next night was a different story. So on the 11th, we called in the morning before we went up to the hospital to find out, and he had a very rough night. In the night he had spiked a fever, and it was really hard for the nurses to get it back down. It was a high fever, and they sent off a blood sample and a urine culture for testing. Actually 2 different urine cultures, and when we got there that morning, he did not look good at all. He was in the swing when I got there, and he had a wet rag on his forehead, and they had this machine blowing cold air on him attached to help him trying to cool down. On the 12th, he was still dealing with fever. He would spike a fever, and then they would get it down, and then it would jump back up again, and they'd get it down. It was hard for them to keep his temperature the way they wanted it to. They even put him on one of these cooling mats that has water running through it to try to regulate his body temperature. His feeding was all over the place. Excuse my toddler in the background being as noisy as he can be while I'm filming this. One feed he would take in 40 ml by himself through a bottle. The next feed he wouldn't take anything. The next one he'd take 20 ml, and the next one he would take 5. He was never consistent with a feed, and so of course they were wanting him to take 85 ml every feed. They were having to give him the rest through his feeding tube to make sure he would get the nutrients he needed. He was doing well weight-wise. He was already at 14 pounds at this point. They ended up placing another IV in his foot, and they hooked a little mobile up to his little crib, and he was enjoying watching that. He was still smiling. He just was sick. We were trying to figure out why. He was running a fever. On the 14th, one of his urine cultures came back. They had taken 2 different ones and a blood test, and one of each, we couldn't get results for 48 hours, but we got results from one that basically told us what we were dealing with, and he had another UTI, and we don't know why he got a UTI. We still don't know why he got a UTI. It's just something he's dealing with because of his bladder and kidney issues. And we were still waiting at this point for the results as to what specific bacteria was in his the results to be able to treat it properly. His foot was acting like it was hurting, or he was acting like he was hurting anytime they would inject his antibiotics they were giving him into the IV in his foot. They said sometimes antibiotics can burn, but usually they don't feel them. But if there was something wrong with the way the IV was set up, he could possibly feel it. And anytime they would try to give him his meds through this IV in his foot, he would start screaming bloody murder, like it was really causing him pain. So they decided, they tried to flush the line to see if it was still good, and it was. So they decided to try to put another IV in one of his arms. Poor little boy's been poked so much. They attempted 3 different vein locations before they got a good insertion, I guess. And it's not they weren't knowing what they were doing, it's just his veins were not good to work with, and it was awful to watch him have to go through that. That day, the Amazing Little Hearts organization, which is the former surgeon of the hospital, was kind of the creator or founder of it, just for all the CHSU families that have heart babies, kind of can get together and meet and talk, or they even have like an online forum type thing where we can talk to other people that have been in similar situations as our family has. Well, they came, a few ladies and their kids came and brought all the families in the CHSU lunch. It was really nice. It was like catering from Jason's Deli. But it was really nice to be able to just sit and take that little break at lunchtime and talk to someone, and see other kids that have had like valves replaced, and you just looking at like this little girl and you can't even tell anything's wrong with her. It was really nice to have that. I would get emotional just being in the CHSU and hearing another baby in another room cry. I remember this day, in the room next to my baby, there's a little window in between each room, and sometimes they have the little blinds open, sometimes they don't. And I was about to leave to go to the restroom, and I was trying to find my nurse just to let her know I was stepping out for a minute. And I stepped out and I couldn't find her, and I hear kind of a panic going on in the room next to us, and I walked over in front of it. Of course, I didn't walk in it. The door was open, but there was about 12 or 13 nurses in there. So many, in fact, around the crib. You couldn't even see the baby in the crib. There was so many. And the mother of the baby over in the corner of the room just hysterically crying and wiping tears away. And it's just very overwhelming when you see that. But you don't know what the situation is with the baby. You can ask your nurses, you know, is so-and-so okay? But they can't tell you anything. It's, you know, a privacy thing. And it's just, even if you genuinely care, you really can't get any kind of news on other patients. But it's just really hard seeing that not only the babies that are going through things, but the families. And but it's very heartbreaking feeling like you're helpless and feeling like you can't help this poor little child that doesn't have any control over what's going on with them. So that was just an emotional day. So I found out they were going to do what they call a PICC procedure with my baby because they were having to stick him so many times. They don't want to have to keep doing that. So it's just kind of like a more permanent IV, one that they can draw blood from, and they won't take it out until they're completely ready to take it out, unless for some reason it stops working the way it should. And they were going to have to put him under sedation and on oxygen to insert this IV into his arm. The next day, on the 15th, was the last day I pumped. I was exclusively pumping milk for my baby, and I did so religiously about every 2 or 3 hours the first 2 months of his life. And I had quite a frozen stock, as well as what I was able to feed him and keep in the refrigerator for the next few days. I was blessed with a very heavy supply, but I don't know why the month leading up to his surgery, my supply started to drop. I just put it down to it was regulating. I did stop taking prenatals, and then I also had dental surgery and was on medications where I couldn't give him my milk while I was doing that, and I was just pumping and dumping and feeding him what I had in the fridge or frozen. So it could have been medications as well. Nurses and my husband think stress has a lot to do with it, but my supply drastically dropped from me getting, I don't know, 15 ounces a pump session to 3 tops, which some mothers would say 3 ounces a pump session is still a lot, but I wasn't pumping at this point every 3 hours. I was only pumping about 3 or 4 times a day at this point. And I was only getting 2 or 3 ounces, and I was still on medication at this day from having a tooth pulled that was still very painful for me. I had a bone fragment loose sticking out of my gums, and I was on pain meds for that and antibiotics. So the 15th was the last day I pumped, and it was quite emotional for me, but also something the nurses were thinking is my baby not liking the way my milk tasted after surgery. They said sometimes their taste changed, and somewhere they heard that frozen breast milk, once it's thawed and, you know, warmed up to serve a baby in a bottle, might have a weird taste to it or taste a little soapy. They said it smells a little different. And he may just be super picky and not like it. And so they were starting to give him formula, and he would take formula fine. Of course, not the full amount. They were also upping his food intake to 100 ml every 3 hours. And sometimes he would take 30, and sometimes he would take 50. And then the next time he would only take 15 by mouth. And they would have to NG tube the rest. But it was an emotional day for me because I put so much effort into pumping and wanting to give that to my baby. Of course, I know fed is best, and as long as he eats and is gaining weight, that's the main thing. And I have a lot of people telling me, you know, you did great. You gave him the best start, you know, for the first, you know, 4 months of his life on your breast milk. But I'm a little bit bummed that he's not going to be interested in the rest of the supply that I had pumped. But it is what it is. I want him to be healthy and drink whatever he wants to drink. The next day, we started to notice my oldest son, who, of course, was still with us. We were staying in a hotel and flip-flopping every few hours in the waiting room to spend time with my baby. We noticed my oldest son starting to run a fever, and I honestly didn't think too much of it. He's 20 months and he was teething. He's trying to cut 2 molars right now, and so I put it down to that. But then he developed a little cough, and I was like, oh no. And so we decided to stay at the hotel with him and not go into the hospital in case he was sick. We didn't want to pass anything to the baby boy, and I'm really glad that we did stay at the hotel, because on St. Patrick's Day, on March 17th, both me and my husband started to fever, and that sucked. We both had a horrible cough, had a horrible nose. As you can tell, I am just now getting over it. If you want to know the date, today is, I think, the 24th or 25th. I can't even remember. I think it's the 24th. I've got a little bit of congestion, but my cough is gone, and I haven't had a fever in 2 days. My son and my husband haven't had a fever in 2 days either. So this entire last week, from the 17th to the 24th, which of course he turned 4 months on the 20th, we haven't been up at the hospital at all. But I think we're finally starting to get over it, and tomorrow we're going to go back up to the hospital to see my son, because it's been a week since I've seen him in person. I did call about every 3-4 hours to get an update from his nurses. One of the nurses was even nice on the 20th to send me pictures so I could do a little monthly update picture. It's just not looking like my other ones. But little boy is doing well. We're having to keep him in a CHSU because he wasn't running a fever anymore, but he was on a 2-week run of antibiotics, and I believe he finishes those today. Is getting another urine culture done, which they took that, I believe, 2 days ago, and I called right before filming this video, and no bacteria had grown in it, so hopefully their UTI is gone and out of his system. And tomorrow he has a VCUG procedure scheduled, and hopefully we can get some kind of answer as to why he got this UTI, to check on his kidneys and his bladder. But that's pretty much the update. You know, he's 4 months old now, and his scar is healing beautifully. Of course, you can see through all the pictures and videos I'm posting. He's doing really well. He's a happy baby. One of his nurses says he loves to watch American Idol. She'll sit in the rocking chair with him and watch TV. And the other one says that he likes to be sang to. Another one said he likes to be read to. So it's really nice that even though I haven't been there to be able to be a mother to him in a week, because I didn't want him to get what we got, that his nurses were giving him the best care. So he is my little fighter, and it's such a blessing to have an awesome medical staff.